Wilma, once again, thank you for doing this presentation, our first presentation for 2025, to tell us all about the new and improved Idaho map.
All right. Well, thank you, Keith. Um, so new is a relative word, I guess. We've been working on this for I think over 30 years. I had lunch with a prior GIO, Nathan Bentley, and I'm like, well, we've been working on it at least since I first became aware of it, since 2008. And he's like, no, 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 no. This goes back to the last century or the last millennium, even in our case. So um, and also, like, who's been working on it? I think a lot of the folks here, maybe even like watching this meeting right now, you have participated. If you've been participating in any Idaho Geospatial Council executive meetings, if you've been participating in technical working groups, then you've had a hand in putting this all together. And so, yes, we've had layers belonging to the Idaho map out for quite a while. I mean, for years. But I think this is the first time that we're trying to put them all together in one application. And so I think the best way to go through this, actually, this is probably not a bad outline for any kind of meeting. It's what, why, how, and what's next. So let's start with the what. So the Idaho map is really just a collection of authoritative data sets that have been put together. There's different pieces to it. So one of them being the map piece. Um, so for all the different technical working groups and all the different folks that have been participating in the different technical working groups, you probably remember that one of the things we talked about is what are the authoritative data sets for Idaho. So for example, in this map here, you can see floodplain data, which the Hazard Technical Working Group determined that FEMA was the authoritative source for that. And so we went, through parcels. I know many of you have participated in the parcel technical working group, which the authoritative source has been determined to be the counties. And then we started talking about what kind of standards do we need to build around it. So this is really the culmination of bringing all that data together in one place. So going to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about hazards. So the Hazard Technical Working Group, one of the, I think, 16, 17 different technical working groups, been quite active trying to identify those layers in Idaho related to hazards. You can recognize them if you go on ArcGIS online by this authoritative stamp. It's interesting. We could probably do an entire meeting, Keith, about just the definition of authoritative data. And so we try to think of it as who are the people that create this data, who perhaps by statute or administrative rule have to create this data as part of their daily duties. In some cases, all we can do is what is the best available data. If there's no particular um, data set or organization who's been legally tasked with having to produce a data set. So let's talk about the hazard related data. So we've had quite a series of different meetings talking about hazards. So on this map, we have earthquakes. So we have both a live feed of the earthquakes as well as all the historic ones. We have the floodplain data where we determined FEMA was the authoritative source. The Idaho Geological Survey is maintaining all their landslide inventories. Health and Welfare has a radon test results layer talking about that gas that could be leaking into your house. It's actually, if you're worried about it, you can go to their website and order a radon test kit, an active fault, and soon we will talk about some more. Volcano threats will be coming soon. The USGS just released a new data set for that, fault lines, and we still need to have more discussion about wildfire risk. So over time, more and more data sets will come on there. It's not just a map and not just a layer. So when my sister-in-law got married, what we gave them was a whole set of cans. So we went to the store, we bought people food, cat food, just different kinds of cans. Then we took all the labels off and just gave them a whole set of cans without labels. So that obviously was, funny, but if this was just how every can came every day, that would be a problem. So we just want to make sure that the cans, the data layers that we have here on our map have as much information with it as we can. So it will only be approved to be on here if it has quite a lot of metadata. There's some minimum standards that it needs to meet according to policies and standards about metadata that are laid out approved by the Idaho Geospatial Council Executive Committee. There is a data standard. So for example, for the parcel data, we had many meetings. We send out surveys just to figure out what data do counties have, because the authoritative source for parcels are the assessor's offices, but also who is using this data and which attributes do they need for their particular use. So once the technical working group meets once, twice, or maybe even more to figure out what the data set is, make sure it has the metadata, it writes up a data standard, it writes up a nomination. All those documents go to the Idaho Geospatial Council Executive Committee, and there they are reviewed by a larger committee, and then they are approved. So it's not just we put anything on here. It really has to be vetted, and we want to make sure that you can trust it. So then you can have access to this data through an open data site, as well as through the Idaho map, which I showed you on the previous slide. And you can see the progression here along the top of the slide. So then when we go to the open data site, you can tell all the different technical working group names, the ones that are highlighted in purple rather than the ones that are grayed out. Those are the ones where we have data sets that are currently on the Idaho map. And so going on there, it just brings you to the typical open data site. Maybe you have your own open data site that you manage, or you go to the open data site from other agencies. You can go there, click on a specific data site. You can click on it, like right here from the layers button, or just go to the open data site and search for it. And then from here, you have the options to download the data, or better yet, pick up, the geo service, the REST service, and just add it live to your own map. So this is something you can add on an online map. You can add it to your ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, however you're using this data. It's better to connect to the live data, because then as soon as there's a new earthquake, as soon as FEMA makes any changes, as soon as there's a parcel update, your maps will automatically update with it as well. So the Idaho map, it's not just a layer. Hopefully that's becoming more relevant or more obvious. Maybe some of you still remember the old the Idaho map logo, the TIM logo. So that one is no more. And we've replaced it with a brand new, fresh, the Idaho map logo. So it's a combination of things, right? There's the authoritative data that we talked about. There's the defined standard, the schema, which is predictable. There's the open data part where it's available and shared. There it is on an actual map where you can look at all those layers at the same time. It also includes the infrastructure. So for some of them, like the FEMA data, it just sits on the FEMA, servers, and they're the ones hosting it. For some of it, the parcel data, we collect that data here in the office. And honestly, I should have said that earlier. I mean, everybody who has been participating over the last 30 years really deserves a kudos for contributing to this. In terms of building the mapping interface that I was showing you, big kudos to Macon Wheatley and Bradley Bean on my team. But there's the data governance is involved. For the parcel specifically, there's a whole bunch of agreements involved that we have to maintain. There is stewardship, like who authors the data for the parcels, who do we send it to? Then in this case, Macon is writing scripts that automatically, takes that data and puts it into one layer for Idaho. So there's a lot that goes to it that all need to be working and defined to make this working and make sure it stays updated over time. So talking about parcels, roads, and address points, those are the ones where we need to have those sharing agreements, and somebody will need to standardize that data. So we have taken that on in our office. And so that then would be stored on our own infrastructure here at ITS. So the next question is why? Well, hopefully this is already making sense to you before we get into this altogether. But just thinking about data, um, why do we need to govern it? Why do we need standards? Why do we need to keep track of it? So many errors and issues, I mean, I've encountered over the last 30 years that I've been working. So the question is like, who owns this data? Who is publishing the data? Who is fixing the errors that are in there? If you have multiple data sets, you know, they could be in different silos. How do we look at this at the same time? What do all the column headings mean when I open up the table? Is this data relevant to me? Is this even the latest copy? Is this, you know, exactly what I'm looking for? The the table has a label customers in it, but who are the customers? Like, what is meant by that? Can I delete this data? How long has it been sitting around? How good is the data? Where is the data? And then the one on the left, this gets me. There's 5 copies of the same layer, and different people have been editing that layer over time. So now you have 5 parallel data sets, some with some edits, some with other edits, some connected to this map, some connected to that map. And before you know it, it just turns into a ball of spaghetti. Um, so then in my office, being the chief data officer as well as the geographic information officer, I'd like to take a holistic view of just data as a whole. So what would a perfect data world look like? And then how does the Idaho map fit in that? So in a perfect world, data would be easy to find, and it could inspire a data-driven culture where people that need information to make decisions can easily find it. This data is shared. You can trust the data, and then you can use the data to make informed decisions, innovation, and optimize services for your constituents. So in our case, the citizens of Idaho, and in your case, whoever your customers are that you're trying to provide the best services to. And so the way that we'd like to get to that vision, so that would be our mission statement, is to support Idaho's needs by promoting best practices while improving access to shared, trusted, and secure data and analyses. And so whether we're talking about spatial data or we're talking about, you know, data that does not have a spatial component or dimension to it, this holds true, and the vision of the Idaho map fits perfectly within this vision as well. So this is my job here. So 2 hats, 2 scopes. And yes, my name is Wilma. And yes, I was named after Wilma Flintstone. My dad really liked the Flintstones. And so as the GIO, I'm trying to, or we're trying to help federal, state, local, tribal, basically anybody in Idaho who has an interest in spatial data, where we can just make things better by coordinating, by making data available, by connecting people, and just, I guess, just be the grease, the wheel grease that just makes everything moving. And again, when I say I mean we, not just my office, but this is really a community effort. And again, this entire Idaho map, it's not an effort in my office, it's just an effort from the community as a whole. So that's really amazing. So for the chief data officer piece, when I talk about data that maybe does not have a spatial component, I'm mostly focused on just state agencies to try and provide the data to those state agencies, help them share between state agencies to have better outcomes, have data to make better decisions. And in that case, I'm not just limiting myself to spatial data. Some really good examples came up. When you look here to the map, those are health districts, the blue map right there, health districts in Idaho. When we look on our ArcGIS Online account, Some of them have been created in 2013. Some of them were created last year. And what you're looking at in this graph right here is the usage over the last 12 months. Tells me that over 2,000 people have been looking at the health districts from 2013. And so it is still being used. And other layers, also health districts, are still being used as well. And so this turns into a tangled web pretty quick. So it's things like this that we would like to avoid. And so we want to make sure that people realize that the Idaho map, assuming that that data set fits your needs. I know we all have slightly different data sets and we don't have a one size fits all, but if this size fits, then please go here and use this data, preferably through a live connection, so that we just end up with one copy of truth as opposed to maybe 5 or 6. A good example on the left here for making sure that people know what data is out there and where to find it. It's my vision to have a data catalog with not just spatial data, but also things in this case of, where cow dairies are. When people are looking for this in terms of the bird flu, that they know which agency holds that data and how to get it, as opposed to, having to make calls and call around and find out who has that data. So I think I already mentioned that we've been working on this for a really, really long time. So we get into the how portion of this. More recently, we have our Idaho Geospatial Council, which hopefully all of you are members of. We exist underneath the Idaho Technology Authority, which is in statutes. So we have some basis and some authority to operate as the Idaho Geospatial Council and make decisions that hopefully carry weight because it is grounded in statute, in Idaho statutes. So the Idaho Geospatial Council Executive Committee, a number of elected members to represent the Idaho Geospatial Council, which could be any of us, is divided up in 16, 20 different technical working groups that then meet and talk about the data sets that need to be part of the Idaho map. And so we were talking about hazards earlier, so they are a great example. We had many different meetings, and so it's really what comes out of that are those standard nominations and so on. So the next question is what's next? So we did a soft release in early December at a conference for cybersecurity and emergency management. They had some good feedback, and it was nice that book is giving us a little bit of time to fix up some of the things that still maybe need to be tweaked a little bit and get better. So we are planning a big release, big hoopla release on March 14, 2025. We figured Pi Day would be an excellent day to do that. So we are planning some festivities. We want to reach not only the GIS community, folks like you that could be using this data, but also different people that could be using those maps and need to be aware. So we are still planning to see what that looks like, but at the same time, we would also like to start releasing monthly newsletters. We've done this in the past, but we're going to try again, and hopefully this time we will stick with it because I think it would be nice just to highlight a different data set once a month. If more data sets are being added, that would be great to describe those data sets. There are some really cool business cases that people are doing with this particular data. And so I think it would be really cool to showcase those, maybe have interviews with the people that are working on that and have them explain how they are using a particular data set and what they're doing, with it and how it's benefiting from them, and perhaps even have, some ROIs, rate of returns calculated with that. And so here I'd like to announce a volunteer opportunity. So if you are interested, or perhaps if you are a student in a college and you'd like to, get to know some people in the field, start a little bit of your networking, do a little bit of discovery, what people are using this for, write about it. Maybe you're a really good illustrator or you make really nice maps that you would like to showcase, and we can, have them as an illustration for some of those stories. Please scan this QR code. So we are looking for about 3 volunteers. If you can help us, maybe 1, 2 hours a month or even a day a month, I mean, we would greatly appreciate that. It's something that you can put on your resume. You get to, like I said, interact with other folks. So scan this QR code. I will also put it on the very last slide so that you can see it. So next, we'd like to get feedback. So I'm gonna show you the website soon. There is a form on there where you can provide feedback. So please use that because it would be nice if there are some more tweaks that we need to make or something is not working as expected. Would be nice to know before we do the big release. So it is released. We did a soft release, but it'd be nice to catch any mistakes or any issues earlier rather than later. We're working on improving the mobile experience. So we do hope to get way more layers on this. So there's a couple of technical working groups that just got off the ground. We have a human interest technical working group. I envision having, hospitals, internet, broadband access, and a lot of demographic information on there. I think we have had 2 meetings with the climate technical working group. And so you can see a list here, for example, for the climate technical working group, but it's already coming out that there's actually different data sets that folks in the technical working group are highlighting as being important. And so the layers could change, but the actual data sets themselves are determined by the folks that are, participating in those technical working groups, which hoping you will be one of those people. So this is my last slide right here. We got the URL, the Idaho map, all spelled out with no spaces, .idaho.gov. I wanted to do tim.idaho.gov, but I got a little pushback, I think rightly so, because people are just going to be wondering who Tim is. But the Idaho map.gov.idaho.gov, hopefully that's easy enough to remember what that is. If you have any questions you would like to participate, please do. Keep an eye out on Geotech for meetings, technical working group meetings, for ITCEC meetings, because this will only work if we work together and make this happen. And in the bottom right again is the volunteer opportunity. So please take a look, and if you have a little bit of time, please help us.